Welcome to our webinar today. This is part of our CPD webinar series, so just as a note, if you're a CSAP that's in attendance, you can claim 1 credit from this webinar. And the topic of our webinar is the AA1000 advantage, so using the principles to build competitive, sustainable performance. So just a quick introduction to accountability. We are a global standards and advisory firm. Our advisory services work to provide the practical, relevant, and innovative solutions customized to meet client needs. And if you did not attend, I would really recommend that you watch our advisory team's webinar, where they provided insights into the trends expected to impact the global landscape of sustainability in 2026. So you can find this on our website, and as a bonus, you can also earn extra CPD credit from watching it. Accountability is also a standard setter, so we provide really simple, adaptable, and easy to use frameworks that guide responsible and impact-driven performance. And the aim of our work, whether this be across advisory, standards, or insights, is really to innovate and advance the sustainability agenda by improving the practices, performances, and impacts of organizations. So the webinar today is going to be led by our accountability standards team. So you're going to be hearing from Udaya, who is our acting head of standards. He's been with accountability for over 10 years and has been involved in the development of the AA1000 series of standards, so has that really depth of technical expertise. I will also be presenting today. I am a standards associate, and both of us would really like to say a massive thank you to some of our licensed assurance providers. So Gina from Sustainability Assurance Services, Kenny from Turbo Net Zero, and George from EVORA Global, who provided us with their case studies today. So this presentation is going to cover the context to the AA1000 series of standards and really why they're relevant today. Udaya will then provide an overview of the guidance document and what the key changes have been in the March 2026 version that was just released. This will then be followed by an overview of the sustainability assurance market. And what we really want to do is provide you with some of those insights that we're seeing today before you're going to hear from some of our assurance providers on their real-world case studies. And as always, there's going to be a Q&A at the end. So throughout, please place your questions into the chat. Jamie is managing that. And I would highly recommend you use this time to hear from Udaya, given his depth of expertise. So now Udaya is going to give you a little bit of the context that we're seeing.
Great. Thank you, Amy. So to set the context for why sustainability assurance really matters today, I want to start off with the risk landscape we're operating in. This slide draws on the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report, and what it clearly shows is that many of the most severe risks organizations face today are sustainability related. We are seeing risks linked to climate change, resource scarcity, social instability, misinformation, geopolitical uncertainty, and rapid technological change. And these risks are increasingly interconnected. What's important here is that these risks are no longer abstract or long-term. They're immediate, they affect day-to-day operations, and they directly influence how organizations are perceived by investors, regulators, customers, and broader society as well. And this is where sustainability assurance becomes highly relevant. Looking at the short term, on the left-hand side, the number 2 ranked risks linked to misinformation and disinformation. And it retains prominence in the longer term as well. So the AA1000 assurance directly helps address this by providing an independent, principle-based assessment of sustainability information, which adds credibility externally and benefits internally as well. So when we look at the risk landscape overall, the key message is that sustainability assurance shouldn't be a bolt-on to a reporting exercise. AA1000 assurance strengthens trust, improves data integrity, and can support better decisions in a increasingly complex and uncertain environment. It promotes transparency and credibility. In an environment where misinformation and greenwashing are growing concerns, assurance provides an independent check that helps stakeholders trust what's being reported. Assurance also helps build social license to operate, strengthens trust with stakeholders, whether that's communities, regulators, investors, and organizations are better positioned to navigate social and political risk. It supports integrity through strong data governance and management processes. Assurance pushes organizations to improve how data is collected, managed, controlled. It reduces risk of errors, inconsistencies, or misleading disclosures. Another key benefit is risk identification. Through the assurance process, organizations can uncover risks and opportunities they may not have fully recognized, whether that's gaps in ESG data, weaknesses in controls, or emerging issues that could become material in the future. This then enables more proactive decision making rather than reacting after something goes wrong, for example. Assurance supports earlier intervention, better planning, and more informed strategy. You'll also hear us at Accountability talk about assurance as a driver of strategic decision making. That's because reliable, assured sustainability information can give leadership greater confidence when making long term decisions, particularly in areas like climate transition planning, adaptation strategies, or investment. And this context is important because it helps explain why demand for sustainability assurance is continuing to grow and why AA1000 AS is becoming even more relevant today. Next slide. So I won't go into detail about our three standards. If you're attending this webinar, you already probably have hopefully familiarity around the three standards. We have our foundational accountability principles. Then we have our AA1000 stakeholder engagement standards, which currently is going through a revision process, which is the most widely applied stakeholder engagement standards in the world. And it forms the basis for the principle of inclusivity, which is one of the core of the four accountability principles. And the four principles are carry forward from the principles document all through the AA1000 stakeholder engagement standard and our assurance standard, which is based primarily on the principles in addition to data accuracy and reliability. Next slide. Right. So now we're coming on to the guidance document that were recently revised and updated in March 2026. So the guidance document is an accompanying document to our core series of standards. The three core documents are the documents that you saw on the previous slide. And in addition to that, to support application, we have developed a number of guidance documents, which this is one of. And this is specifically focused to support assurance providers, and it's a more dynamic document. And as we get feedback from practitioners and assurance providers, we will continue to update the guidance document as well to make it more easy to use and user-friendly for those seeking to offer assurance for reporting organizations. So this is an overview of the key changes. So we did have an existing guidance document which laid out a number of different items and sections which were in addition to the content of the AA1000 ASV3. In this document, we've enhanced some of the graphics with a feedback loop showing the continuous improvement in the AA1000 assurance process. We've added other visuals to enhance and clarify how the assurance process is conducted and where assurance providers come in that process to interact with our e-licensing platform, the accountability licensing platform. We've included graphics to support organizations using complementary standards to the AA1000 series. We've added a number of examples based on requests that we've got from assurance providers that some case studies or examples of what that assurance might look in practice would be helpful as well. And particularly with the principle of impact, the principle of impact being one of the latest principles that were added in 2018. So there was requests for more guidance around that, which we have listened to and included. And also an emerging area of interest around the conclusions of an assurance statement. And we've given examples of what that might look like in the hope that they're not sort of used as templates and replicated, but rather used to draw inspiration from when creating the assurance statements at the end of the engagement, which each of these I'll go into a little bit more detail in the following slides. Right. So this one, what I want to draw your attention to is the outer yellow feedback loop you see around this process. This diagram was an existing diagram, and the feedback loop is what was added here. In addition to what the elements of the previous graphic. And what this loop is really showing us is that assurance often isn't a one-off annual exercise. Instead, it's designed as part of an ongoing cycle of learning, improvement, and better decision-making over time. As organizations go through the assurance process from scoping to evidence gathering to forming conclusions, the results don't end in an assurance statement. They feed back into an organization's governance, strategy, and sustainability management processes. For example, issues identified during assurance might highlight gaps in data quality, weaknesses in controls, or opportunities to strengthen stakeholder engagement. That insight then informs how the organization improves its systems, its reporting, and ultimately its performance. So when the next assurance cycle begins, the organization isn't starting from scratch. It's building on what it's already learned. That's what the feedback loop depicts. From an assurance provider's perspective, the loop encourages continuous dialogue rather than a check at the end kind of approach. And from a reporting organization's perspective, it can shift assurance from a compliance requirement into a management tool. So when we talk about AA1000 ASV3, this feedback loop can lead to long-term value, helping organizations learn, adapt, and continuously improve their sustainability performance year after year. Next slide. So this was something that we developed to simplify the assurance process. You saw the assurance process overview in the previous slide, and this flowchart was designed to assist licensed assurance providers and sort of guide them along the way from start to finish. And in this particular diagram, we've updated the links to our e-licensing platform from our legacy version to the latest version that we've released earlier this year. And for those of you who have not interacted with the e-licensing platform yet, we encourage you to log on, activate your accounts, and then prepare yourself for any future use that you may need to for issuing assurance for reporting organizations. Next slide. Right. So what you're seeing here is a new graphic that helps illustrate how the AA1000 AS sits within the broader sustainability standards landscape. The key purpose of this is to support assurance providers in understanding which complementary standards can be used as suitable criteria under AA1000 assurance engagements. One of the strengths of AA1000 AS is that it's a principle-based assurance standard. That means it doesn't operate in isolation. It's designed to work alongside reporting standards, topic-specific standards, and regulatory requirements. This graphic helps bring clarity to that. It gives assurance providers a clearer sense of how different standards can be combined in a coherent way. For example, how reporting frameworks, subject matter standards, and data specific requirements can be assured using A1000 AS as the overarching assurance methodology. From an assurance provider perspective, this is important because it supports consistent and defensible standard selection. This visual helps practitioners assess which complementary standards are the most appropriate to use as a criteria, depending on what the reporting organization is disclosing, of course. Hopefully, the visual helps assurance providers understand whether the right combination of standards are being used. The A1000 AS helps ensure that assurance isn't limiting to checking data accuracy, but looking at how well organizations are managing their sustainability impacts and responding to stakeholder expectations. The intention is for this new graphic to be practical guidance. The standards included are not exhaustive. It helps assurance providers navigate an increasingly complex standard landscape and apply the AS in a way that is rigorous and consistent. Uh, it's a big part of how the standard supports better assurance outcomes. This has been pulled out from the guidance document and is an example of how the examples have been included. There are other examples as well. This is just to give you a sample of how those examples have been included. This talks about how the principle of impact can be evidenced in practice. So under the context, process, and performance, those sub-points that you would see all relate to the criteria which have been drawn from the principle of impact in the AA1000 accountability principles, AP. So when an assurance provider evidences adherence to the principle of impact, they will be using the adherence criteria that's found in the accountability principle and then comparing that against the activities and the tasks or different projects that the reporting organization has conducted to see whether they have been done according to the accountability principles. And in this case, the example provided is for the principle of impact. Right. So this is something that we got feedback from assurance providers that they needed more guidance on what the format of the assurance conclusions could look at. So in doing that, what we did was we included some examples of what an assurance statement could look at, but this is not so that these examples can be sort of used as templates. It's for the assurance providers to get an idea of what sort of content should go into making up those conclusions. So in this case, you could see the four principles being included here as is needed for type 1 engagement. Then For the type 2 engagement, it would need to have conclusions on the data reliability and accuracy. So broadly, in the assurance statement, the AA1000 AS will guide assurance providers to explain what was assured, how the assurance was conducted, and what level of confidence can be placed on the assured information being reported, while as the assurance conclusion should capture the organizational performance on the four principles if it's a type 1 assurance, and then also include conclusions on the reliability and accuracy of the data if it's a type 2.
Okay, thank you, Udaya. So now that we've looked at some of those key changes, we really want to see why an assurance standard for sustainability is really particularly relevant in the market that we're seeing today. So we're seeing that there is a increasing demand for sustainability insurance. So jurisdictions are really increasingly seeking to standardize sustainability assurance. And this is because they are acknowledging some of the benefits that Udaya highlighted, and this ranges from increasing the accuracy and reliability of data, enhancing that decision making, and also strengthening stakeholder relationships. And at accountability, we've seen this globally. So in California, for example, they introduced limited assurance requirements for scope 1 and 2 emissions. In India, they implemented reasonable assurance requirements for the disclosure of sustainability information. And in Hong Kong, they just recently had an open consultation surrounding introducing limited assurance for the disclosure of sustainability information. So the AA1000 assurance standard is really beneficial to the market that we're seeing today. Not only was it the first sustainability-specific assurance standard to be developed, but it also has some really unique characteristics that make it suitable to address some of those market changes that we're seeing. So firstly, as Udaya mentioned, it's bound to core sustainability principles. So these are the AA1000 accountability principles of inclusivity, materiality, responsiveness, and impact. And each assurance statement really has to explain how the reporting company meets these principles. These principles inherently have sustainability at their core, which means that every insurance statement and engagement carried out under the AA1000 has the same values. The AA1000 assurance standard also allows sustainability experts and practitioners to be the ones conducting the engagement. So we have a requirement that at least one certified stakeholder assurance practitioner must be involved in each engagement. And this is really beneficial in assessing that sustainability data, which can often be quite unique in nature. So it provides that longer term perspective and generally more accurate view of performance. Accountability also has processes in place to ensure that a really high standard is upheld with the use of the assurance standard. So this includes a quality assurance protocol. So there's a review of the pre-engagement terms and also of any report findings. And this really ensures that the statement and the engagement itself is aligned to our standard. We also have an issue and dispute resolution processes. And both of these really reinforce the credibility and robustness of the engagement and the assurance statement that's being issued. And we've been able to see that the AA1000 assurance standard really has that tangible value. So it increases ESG rating scores, as shown through some research. So to begin, issuing an ESG report in itself increased a company's overall score by a 5.4 average over 2 years. And this was 0.9 points more than non-reporting companies over time. However, those that used the AA1000 assurance standard to assure their report received a 5.9 increase. So this was 1.4 points over non-reporters. Also, we saw that regular users of the standard saw that continuous growth year on year on their ESG rating score, which is what the reporting companies are looking for. And this research also showed that the AA1000 assurance standard really helped companies to grow their scores, specifically across 6 different sustainability topics. So these were leadership ethics, board management, training, health and safety, diversity and labor rights, compensation and benefits, and product. And we've also been able to speak to some of our licensed assurance providers who operate with their clients and attest to the benefit of the AA1000 assurance standard. So we're going to hear from a few of them regarding their use cases. But what I want us to really highlight is that these examples show the really diverse application of the AA1000 assurance standard across different industries and for different use cases. So our first example has been provided to us by Sustainability Assurance Services. They were engaged by Energy Vault to conduct an assurance of their sustainability report and their environmental and social KPIs. And so we're now going to hear from Gina, who is going to explain the engagement to us.
I'm the Director of Assurance at Sustainability Assurance Services. I come to you with 30 years of experience as a sustainability professional, including on being both sides of the audit table, as being audited and also providing assurance, sustainability assurance. Sustainability Assurance Services was established to meet the growing need for third-party verification of sustainability-related data and reporting. SAS, as we're known as, draws on decades of experience to provide tailor-made sustainability assurance services for organizations and certification bodies. When you work with SAS, you work with a provider who is well-versed not only in assurance practices, but also in sustainability reporting, greenhouse gas emission calculations, and non-financial data. At SAS, we take the time to listen, learn, and adapt to foster a personalized partnership and customized experience that aligns with each organization's unique needs and goals while maintaining independence and impartiality. We guide our clients through the assurance process every step of the way and provide sustainability services that improve our clients' sustainability programs. Our work with Energy Vault demonstrates the value of this assurance approach. As a small publicly traded company, Energy Vault originally came to SAS to improve ranker and rating assessment score, which asked for a limited data verification scope. In our initial discussions, preparing for this proposal, we realized that they had a full sustainability program. And because AA1000 and the accountability principles evaluate the effectiveness of the management system, we determined that a full report assurance would not cost that much more than the singular data verification, but it would allow them to further meet their stakeholder needs. Therefore, we entered in an engagement agreement for their full 2023 sustainability report. As we went through the engagement, Energy Vault's sustainability program demonstrated adherence to the accountability principles in this first year and were awarded assurance of their report. Because of this, they were awarded the industry mover designation by S&P Global, fulfilling their original scope of having data verification to improve their raters and rankings setting. As a young organization, this recognition was very valuable as they're looking for potential investors, which was a key audience of S&P Global. Part of the engagement was not only going through auditing of and verification of the data, but also reviewing all of their sustainability program to ensure that everything within the report was backed by solid evidence. In addition, and part of the engagement also includes a detailed findings report in addition to an external-facing assurance letter. The detailed findings report includes opportunities for improvement. Energy Vault used this report to improve in year 2. In this engagement, by using the power of the AA1000 standard and the findings of the report, the year 2 resulted in not only a better report, but also more effective organizational sustainability program. A few of the findings that led to this. Initially, the Energy Vault reported on all topics that were potentially material to the organization, but thinking that it's better to report more than to report what's most important. But that diluted their message, not only in the report, but also spread the team thin. The principle of materiality and stakeholder engagement within AA1000 prioritizes and calls for prioritizing to the most important and key material topics. By utilizing and identifying this opportunity, this allowed Energy Vault to prioritize their topics and focus their work on what was most important to the organization. Again, not diluting the message within the report, but also improving their performance and becoming more efficient internally. Also, in another finding in the first year of assurance was reporting of data versus thinking about impact and reporting impact. As a renewable energy storage company, positive impact is inherent in their business. However, as we were working through response and impact principles, it highlighted opportunities to better communicate what they're doing to address positive and negative impacts of their operations and not just report data as data points. This allowed them to not only better communicate the work that they were doing to reduce their impact, but also tie in a stronger messaging related to their business as a whole and not just as sustainability as a standalone entity. Finally, on our third finding, as we were going through the 4 principles and Energy Vault was learning through the process and highlighting their management approach, it was able to identify to help them connect their full program from material topics through target setting, initiatives to achieve those targets, and finally reviewing performance. This allowed them to really start thinking about their program as a system as opposed to individual components. And with that, the next year in their year 2 assurance, as an auditor, I was pleased to see that they added a best practice table within their report that clearly and transparently communicated their full program, tying their impacts, their material topics with the impacts, with the KPIs, with the strategy, and fully aligning with the AA1000 expectations. Now I tell everyone about this best practice when I get a chance. Also, as they had completed the audit, they recognized the value of the documentation that they had created, and also some of the areas where they could have improved documentation throughout the process. The principles based of AA1000 does allow organizations to provide evidence in a variety of ways. So while meeting the requirements of the principles, we could do a better job in that. And so finally, they did recognize how important some of their programs that they did have and documenting of them really made a difference in the second year engagement and being able to go through the engagement even more effectively and quickly. And each year, Energy Vault is building on these findings to continually improve their program with the effective use of their limited financial and human resources. Ultimately, the full review of AA1000 ensures a balanced report backed with demonstrated governance and a management approach to avoid greenwashing in reports or any other data verification. As a small company with a 2-person sustainability team, Energy Vault does not have the budget to outsource their sustainability program or report or other portions of their program. However, by receiving third-party assurance, Energy Vault is able to increase stakeholder confidence, support their ratings performance, and prepare for further regulatory demands without the additional cost of outsourcing. We were excited to work with Energy Vault on this engagement. As an auditor, it was very rewarding to see the improvement that they were able to make year over year, and we look forward to continuing advancing our relationship. Thank you.
So thank you to Gina, who provided us with that really interesting case study. We also have another case study for you here. So this has been provided from Turbo Net Zero by Kenny. They were engaged by Life Capital for the verification of their impact framework, investment processes, and reporting practices. So let's hear about their engagement.
Hi, everyone. I am Kenny Chen, Managing Partner of Turbo Net Zero. We are a sustainability and impact advisory firm focused on the private markets. And first of all, thank you to the accountability team for having me today. Today, I will walk you through how we applied the AA1000 assurance framework in an impact private equity context through a recent engagement with Life Capital. I will start with the background of the engagement and then walk you through our assurance approach and the process, share the key outcomes, and close with a few practical takeaways. Let me start with the background of the engagement. Life Capital is a healthcare-focused private equity firm investing across therapeutics, diagnostics, and medical technologies with a Trans-Pacific Asia-US linkage focus and managing over $2 billion in assets. Their impact strategy is guided by what they call the PACE framework, focusing on performance, accessibility, cost effectiveness, and efficiency. As their impact platform matured, they reached a point where the question was no longer just about defining and measuring impact, but about validating it. In other words, how do you demonstrate that impact is not just a framework, but something that is systematically embedded in how investments are selected, managed, and reported? That's where this engagement came in. Life Capital engaged us to provide independent verification of their impact report on their impact framework, how impact is integrated across the investment lifecycle, and how impact performance is measured and disclosed. Importantly, this included assessing alignment with the AA1000 assurance framework, as well as leading global impact standards, such as the operating principles for impact management, Jane Iris, and the UN SDGs. In response, we conducted a Type 2 moderate assurance engagement under AA1000 AS version 3, covering the design, implementation, and reporting of their impact management system, including how impact is measured, managed, and disclosed. And I'd like to acknowledge James Zhao and the Life team for their openness and the strong transparency throughout the process. Let me now turn to the outcomes of the engagement. There are 4 key outcomes. First, independent and positive impact verification. In line with the AA1000 standard and recognized global impact frameworks, we provided third-party validation that Life's impact management system aligns with the recognized impact standards, confirming that impact is systematically embedded within their investment management and the reporting processes. Second, enhanced transparency. The assurance improved visibility into how impact objectives and outcomes are defined, measured, and reported, making the system more structured and the decision useful for both internal teams and external stakeholders. Third, a validated evidence trail. We assess their internal documentation, control processes, data traceability, as well as monitoring and the reporting systems. This provides a clear basis for Life to demonstrate that their impact claims are supported by credible and traceable evidence. And fourth, actionable recommendations. In line with AA1000 recommendation, we issued an independent management report outlining specific recommendations, supporting Life in further strengthening alignment and continuously improving their impact management system. So overall, the assurance provides not only independent validation, but also a structured pathway for ongoing improvement. Let me close with a few practical takeaways for organizations considering impact assurance. First, impact needs to be embedded, not added on. It has to be integrated across the investment lifecycle, supported by clear evidence, governance, defined methodologies. Otherwise, it will not stand up to assurance. Second, assurance should be used as an internal management tool. The real value is not just external validation. It is a discipline it brings in strengthening the process, clarifying accountability, and improving consistency in investment decision-making. And third, assurance plays an important external role. It provides stakeholders with independent confirmation that impact claims are credible, structured, and supported by robust systems. If I leave you with one message, it is this: impact assurance is not about proving perfection. It is about demonstrating that impact is managed with rigor, discipline, and accountability. Finally, I'd like to thank the accountability team for their support and the guidance throughout the process. In particular, special thanks to Melanie O'Brien, Aimee Shah, and the rest of the accountability team for their close collaboration. This work would not have been possible without their support. And thank you all for watching this webinar. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to Kenny for sharing their use of the AA1000 assurance standard. We have one final example for you, and this has been provided to us by George from EVORA Global. So EVORA is a leading sustainability advisor delivering climate solutions to real asset investors. They wanted to highlight why they really valued the AA1000 assurance standard for the engagements that they conduct. So they've completed over 200 assurance engagements in the past 5 years, and they really frequently choose to use the AA1000 assurance standard for these engagements. They wanted to highlight why they selected the AA1000, and they said that this is because it's a globally recognized standard aligned with some of the leading reporting frameworks that they've seen. So, for example, GRESB. And for most of their insurance engagements, EVORA conducts a Type 2 moderate assurance engagement covering energy, water, waste, and greenhouse gas data across underlying real estate assets with investment funds. So when asked why they said that the AA1000 assurance standard works well, they highlighted 4 key reasons. Firstly, they stated that it provides that really structured and scalable approach because it's applicable across diverse sectors and geographies, from those small portfolios to those large portfolios of assets. They also said that it goes beyond comparable standards by evaluating internal data collection processes and highlights that continuous improvement opportunity for their clients. It also strengthened the confidence in the reported data through the more detailed review of data quality, accuracy, and reliability. And lastly, they also found that it allowed them to provide really actionable recommendations to clients and stakeholders through the assurance statement and the optional report to management. So now that we've been able to give you an overview of the updated guidance document, some of those key changes, and why sustainability assurance is really relevant to the market today, we'd like to open this up to Q&A. So please place your questions in the chat and Jamie will ask them to us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I've organized the questions from the Q&A, and our first question is from Michael Ray. How should CSAPs address lies of omission, i.e. when companies don't provide data on material issues, as is the case for retailers not reporting delivery driver deaths in South Africa? Aimee or Udaya, would you like to take on this question?
Yeah, I could have a go at answering that. And I would invite feedback from any of our assurance providers or CSAPs who are in attendance as well. So I believe what this would fall under would be materiality. The adherence criteria for materiality would look at whether the company has addressed and then reported on the material issues that they had identified. So in this specific example, or if it's an example of something that is deemed material and then it has been withheld, then it's up to the assurance provider to make that judgment. And under the conclusion, there's a possibility that if that assurance provider assesses that it is a significant topic which has not been addressed in an appropriate manner by the reporting organization, has not been reported, it can be included under the conclusion that not all material topics have been included in the report. It also spans some of the other principles as well. So it could be a possibility that the correct stakeholders have not been engaged. The stakeholder engagement has not been wide enough. So there are linkages to inclusivity as well. Then the response of the organization, which is responsiveness, and then finally the impact as well. So it would span across the four principles, but I feel that it should be under the materiality principle that this is of most importance. Michael, or any of the other CSAPs and license assurance providers, if you have a view, please share that as well.
Unfortunately, the unmute function has now been disabled for this meeting. So Michael, if you had any thoughts, please do feel free to just put them into the Q&A. Amy, do you have anything to add to that answer? Or if any other CSAPs have anything else to add, please feel free to put them into the Q&A. Hi, Michael. Yeah, the unmute function has been disabled for this meeting. So if you have any further thoughts, you can feel free to put them into the Q&A. Thank you very much. On to our next question. So with IFRS S1 and S2 evolving, are you noticing any shift in preference between AA1000 AS and ISAE 3000, especially as sustainability disclosures become more financially integrated? Aimee, Udaya, would you like to take on this one?
Sure, maybe I'll just respond to that briefly, and if there's anything else Aimee could add to that. So we wouldn't say we're seeing a shift as such. We've seen organizations prefer one standard or the other in terms of assurance, and there are some reporting organizations who've gone for a combination of the two as well. With the ISA 3000 now, the ISA 5000 being introduced and now being in use as well, there has been a tendency for organizations who want to meet the regulation, the minimum regulation of assurance, then defaulting sometimes to the ISA 3000 in the past, and currently shift taking place to the ISA 5000. The AA1000 always has been, and in the future as well, has been active in the market as a sort of assurance plus. So it goes beyond the data reliability and accuracy mandate of ISA 3000 and ISA 5000, because the AA1000 uses this principle-based assurance, and as part of the assurance, there's a need to form conclusions on adherence of each of the principles as well. So reporting organizations have in the past seen a value of having the assurance engagement to be of broader significance and add value to the organization by a number of different ways, which we've covered early on in the presentation, such as unearthing new areas of material interest that are emerging, which may not have been identified before, or seeing any gaps in reporting that may exist, which then through the continuous improvement process that the AA1000 uses can add value. So when you look at ISA 3000 or ISA 5000, primarily these are being used as assurance on the data reliability and accuracy, and not necessarily on improving organization performance, which is at the heart of the AA1000 assurance. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that, Aimee?
I would like to highlight that, as you mentioned, the assurance standard is really that principles-based framework. So the ISA 3000, which will then become the ISA 5000, isn't designed to be a different standard to the AA1000 assurance standard. They're both meant for reporting entities to choose which one best suits them. So Accountability also released a bridging document which highlights this, and I'd really recommend that you go take a look at that in response to your question, which can be found on our website.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Aimee and Udaya. Our last question for the Q&A session is actually directed towards Gina, but perhaps Aimee and Udaya, you could take a pass at trying to answer the question first. What determines whether SAS is opting to use the AA1000 AS in an assurance engagement? Do clients express a preference? Udaya, over to you first.
Yeah, this one, I'm not familiar with the particular case, so don't want to speak on Gina's behalf. But what we have heard from licensed assurance providers is at times the client, that's the reporting organization, is not really that knowledgeable on the assurance standards and the potential of using the different assurance standards. So it, as far as our understanding is, it's very much a case-by-case basis, and which assurance benefits the reporting organization more. So if the reporting organization only wants to comply with the legal minimum and focus on just the data accuracy and the reliability, then they might choose a different assurance standard. Whereas if the reporting organizations have decided that they want a value added onto assurance and they are focused on improving their sustainability performance, then for an additional amount, because there are additional processes that need to be incorporated, some more things that need to be done in addition to the minimum non-financial assurance engagement, then they would go in for the A1000. And that's how it has been from a very long time. And it's likely to continue in the future, where assurance, we are hoping that assurance will be seen more for the value that it can add rather than bolted on to the usual reporting process to meet the legal minimum. So AA1000s focus more on companies who want to improve sustainability performance and move beyond just performing at the baseline level that legal compliance addresses.
Wonderful. If there's nothing to add there, we'll conclude the Q&A session there. Thank you so much, everyone, for your wonderful questions. Passing it back over to you, Aimee.
Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. Just as a reminder to our CSAPs, you can claim 1 credit from this webinar. Attendance will be followed up with an email, which you can provide as evidence. So thank you all for attending, and please keep an eye on our website for some upcoming exciting webinars too. Thank you.